Hello as you come in. Greetings, everybody, as you come in. Today is the 29th of August, 2021. And frankly, I don't know how the sound is going to be on this. Maybe I should. I'm trying to stay out of the sun as much as I can. Hello, Roosevelt. It's a pretty warm day. It's very humid. For this area, it's about 50% humidity right now. So that's quite a bit for here, especially on a day when the sun is shining. Sound is good, thank you. What is that, Dylan Anderson? Thank you. 5x5. Thank you so much. Uh, yeah, it's Sunday, and I'm out here in the marshes. You can see I'm right in the midst of the reeds here. Ducks, geese, bobcats. I just had a bobcat come and check me out. Tried to get a picture of it, but as soon as I moved, it's on. But I can hear it still roaming around over here. So I'm not really that far out in any place. I'm down by a river. It's in a city area, but I wanted to find a place that was somewhat secluded. And you can hear there was a duck there. So what am I doing here today, and what am I talking about when I say a bulwark for defense? You know, I had a dear friend. No, I'm not duck hunting. No, no. I had a dear friend say, you ought to talk a little bit about what the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Bible talk or say about standing up for liberty and doing the things that are required of us in order to not just obtain our liberty and the liberty of others. Hello, Ms. Cat. But to sustain it. And especially what to do when you're in the process of losing it. How do you, or I should say, what do you do to try to sustain it, to protect it, and to get back what you've lost? And I've got to tell you, I've thought about that. I've had this request now for a couple of days, and it's been on my mind actually for a long time anyway. And I think most everybody knows that I'm constantly thinking about these subjects. And I've got to come to you today and tell you that I'm really not prepared to tell you. Then why am I here? Because what I mean by that is that every situation is different. Every situation is different. So that's really what I wanted to talk about today. Is about what is it that we do, and that's what a bulwark is. A bulwark is an earthen mound or a barrier, a protection against whatever's trying to attack you. And sometimes we become the bulwarks in the spiritual sense in this very spiritual and physical war. It's both. So I reviewed a lot of things in the Bible and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, trying to pick up exactly what it is we should do. And I guess first and foremost, it really comes down to the individual. It really isn't even a group thing. It's really an individual thing. That's really where the test is. You know, however you look at the Old and New Testaments and the prophecies and the whatever you want to call them, I think the basic bottom line is in all of this that all nations of the earth will come to an end. That in these last days, the nations are proving that they're not worth retaining their power. They're not even worth a bug's spittle on the sidewalk. The individual was pretty much taken care of 2,000 years ago and every day. But if you read those scriptures really close, you find out if you believe in God, He doesn't have a whole lot of respect for any of the nations, not any of them, because they've all fallen short of being the bulwark, the protection of their people, of their own people. Historically, even when they've supposedly gone to war in defense of their country, inevitably, in almost every circumstance that I know of in history, the nation has eventually turned on its own people in one way or another. So, I've been pondering about these things, and I don't mean to come on and pontificate, but I will cover a couple of examples of where these things are. And I want to make a distinction between rebellion and a revolt. A rebellion is against the established power. Okay? That's what a rebellion is. A revolt is an attempt to set the established power back on a proper course. Do you see the difference? It's a fine line, it's a hair's breadth difference, but there is a difference. There was a rebellion in heaven, in the war in heaven. Isaiah talks about it. There was not a revolt in heaven, and if there was going to be such a thing, then the established order wouldn't necessarily have been done away with, but the rebellion was an effort to replace the established order. Do you see the difference? In other words, Lucifer, for lack of a better term, wanted to become the Almighty. He wanted to replace the existing order, not revolt to try to get it to go back to its being a bulwark protection of the people. Now, you might say, well, God was going to do perfection. I realize that, but I'm trying to show you the difference between a revolt and a rebellion. So, what are we to do here? Are we supposed to engage in rebellion? No, I don't think so. We are to be bulwarks of a defense against the evil that's in our government, because we're partially responsible for our governments being the way they are. We've let them loose without reining them in for far too long, and they've taken advantage of us at this point. But that's because we've actually allowed it. So my feeling is that all we can do at this point is stand on our own 2 feet and refuse to submit ourselves to the evil that is in these governments today. Not rebel against them, but to stand firm in our resolve not to bow down any longer. That seems almost like a cop-out in some ways, because at least most men anyway, we want to get up and we want to put down these evil people that have taken over and threaten not only our own lives and the lives of our families and our loved ones, but our friends and our extended relationships. And in self-defense, that's perfectly fine. The problem is that as we have seen in so many situations, Waco, Ruby Ridge, Bundy Ranch, and there have been many, many others, when you stand up in defense of yourself, even though that's a righteous thing to do, you have to know that the powers that be are going to lower all of their forces upon you in retribution. Does that mean that we up and defend ourselves? No, not at all. What it means is that unfortunately you become a testament, a witness against the evil, even if you are forced out of this life under violence. These nations are. Yeah, I know. Either I said something they didn't like, or it's just the signal here is getting interrupted. Sorry about that. Let's continue on here if we can. I'm going to set this back in the stand here, so hold on just a second. I mentioned Haiti. Apparently, they didn't like that. My point is that those nations that have withstood this onslaught of this assault on mankind, and you all should know what I'm talking about. A lot of these good people have suffered assassination, whatever. So the word's gone out, right? And I'm sure a lot of our politicians have had that as well. I might get bumped off here again, so I'll try to finish up here. And I know this isn't quite what was requested of me, but this is what I'm going to get down to. I look through the Bible, and a lot of people say you're not supposed to up against evil. You're not supposed to resist evil. Well, that's not really true. I think that's uh, a poor translation of really what it's talking about, and I mean interpretation as well. All through the Bible, there were those who stood up against tyranny. You know, we had Elijah, Elisha. We have the situation with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who refused to bow down to the statue of Nimrod and worship it. We had Daniel get thrown into the lion's den, etc., etc. Jeremiah, all these people that refused to bow down to the government. Uh, but they didn't rebel. Do you see the difference? They revolted. In other words, they refused to bow down, but they didn't rebel. Do you see the difference? And I'm not saying I even like this. That's why I had a hard time coming on here, because I want to go do something. I want God to say, yeah, here's the weapons to go destroy these people that are doing this to you. Go do it. But I couldn't find any examples of that. I could find examples of foreigners coming in and being taken down. For instance, Jezebel, Ahab's wife from Tyre, Jehu came out and had her servants, toss her out the window, right? Because of how evil she was. She was an evil, she was one of the leaders, Ahab's wife. And that's how that was dealt with. That's only one example, though, that I could really think of. Until I got to the Dead Sea Scrolls. And in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have the Messianic movement, and those of you who have read my book, and again, Roosevelt might want to put up the link to that if they care to do that. It talks about this Messianic movement, which was basically a war against Rome and the Herodians. But what had happened there? Was this really their nation? Well, they had interlopers. They had people come in and infiltrate their nation. The Herodians were Edomite Arabs put into power by the Romans. They weren't Jews. So the situation was such that their country had been invaded by a foreign power, Rome, and their puppets put into place. And so the Messianic movement decided to fight back. And Jesus was part of that, which a lot of people won't understand. But again, he's said to be as wise as a serpent and as harmless as a dove. And if you understand that phrase, it means only strike when it's safe to do so, is really what it means. So it was very careful how they proceeded. But then later on, around 50 AD, the Messianic movement got strong enough where they were able to overthrow the high priest Ananus and the Herodians and take over the temple again. But it didn't last very long. And in reality, when I look at the history of that, what occurred was is they tried to force prophecy. In the process, James, the apostle, the brother of Jesus, was killed by the establishment high priests, the Herodian high priests. Herodians represented Rome. And after that, of course, as you know, all of Jerusalem was destroyed. Well, here's the catch. There was a thing called the flight to Pella, the Pella flight. And those who were faithful left Jerusalem. In other words, they went and stood in a holy place. They separated themselves. Even before the real fighting began. Now, I haven't resolved this in my mind, to be honest with you. I'm still not sure how to take all of this. But the promises of the war scroll that they were going to defeat the Kittim, that's the Romans, and the Herodians who had usurped their country, the promises that God was going to fight their battles, and if they stayed pure, it would happen, it didn't. As a matter of fact, Rome not only destroyed them in 70 AD, but again in several other messianic uprisings, pretty much ending in the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 135 AD, which totally decimated, destroyed the entire, everything. So I've been trying to resolve in my mind what God expects of us. And I'm just being honest with you, I haven't resolved it yet, but apparently it has something to do with this idea of revolt and rebellion, the difference between the two. Again, you have every right to defend yourselves. If they come at you with this weapon of war, which they are trying to GMI into everybody, you have a right to defend yourself, because that is a use of deadly force against you. And I'm speaking in veiled terms here as usual, right? But that's a very dangerous proposition, and the destruction of the Messianic movement and the early Christians is a good example of that. Apparently, sometimes you really do have to endure to the end, and the end means even to your death. And that's not something that, especially a military guy like myself wants to look at. You want to survive to fight another day. You want to make, as Patton said, make the other guy die for his country, right? But at this point, I think we're supposed to just be a bulwark. We stand for what's right. We don't submit ourselves to the evil, which is going to put us in a place where we're going to be persecuted. And I'm not saying that you individually have to stand up and take that. You have a right to defend yourself when deadly force is used against you. You have a right to use deadly force in return. But you have to be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. So we need to stand up for principle, even when no one else has done so. And I've talked about that before, that at least I consider myself this way, and I can't say I've been perfect at it, but I will stand up for pure, naked principle, even if I'm the only person to do so. That's a pretty scary place to be. And for those of you who don't know my background, I've been there multiple times. Multiple times. This Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, I think is his name, I might have that wrong, who stood up, and he was a Marine Lieutenant Colonel, and stood up and said, he's really disappointed in the incompetence of the commanding staff, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, etc. Yeah, that's needed, even though it's on the verge of doing some things that can be a problem. I'll just say he had the guts to do it. But as John Cardillo pointed out on Twitter there, Vindman did it. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman did it against his commander-in-chief, and nothing happened to him. So here we go with selective enforcement again. But that's the danger that you face when you stand up as an individual. When your head comes up above all the other heads, it's going to get lopped off. Look what happened to Jesus. His head rose above all the others, and they lopped off his head, figuratively speaking. And essentially, they did the same to his brother James. There's a question as to whether James was actually stoned to death by the establishment, Herodian scribes, Pharisees, priests, or whether he was clubbed with a soap maker's club, very similar to Hiram Abiff, which is an interesting story I might get into one of these days. Hiram Abiff, of course, of Masonic tales, legends, instructions, etc., degrees, whatever. But I'm not going to get into that today. So, all I can tell you after looking at this thing on a number of days is that you have every right to defend yourself against someone trying to use deadly force against you. And as much as we want our government to be set on the right course, first of all, we have been invaded by a foreign occupying force. It's very obvious, but the problem is that that at least a good portion of the people have accepted it and gone along with it, almost to the point of worshiping it and dancing in the streets. You know, and I could give you lots of examples as to the reason why that's the case. And we would be justified in trying to forcefully overthrow that. But as I just pointed out, even in the best of circumstances, that hasn't worked out too well in the past, historically speaking. There have been exceptions, but not many. And it really depends on the righteousness of the people. And ladies and gentlemen, where is the righteousness of the American people at this point in time? Where is their righteousness? It's almost non-existent. I agree, there are a lot of people that are good here. A lot of people. Yes, that's the point. Monkey, is that what that is? God is separating, yeah. He's separating out the individuals from the nation as a whole. And that's a very uncomfortable position to be in. But that's why I say that we need to be bulwarks. We need to be the barriers to say no. And the type of barrier I'm talking about is saying, you're not going any further. You're going to stop right there, at least as far as this is with me, right? And with my family. You're not coming any closer. And maybe if there are enough of those, as I've been asking everybody to pray for deliverance in a place of refuge, maybe the great eternal, the God and Father of us all, will hear us and provide those two things. But I think this is on us. James, the brother of Jesus, was considered the bulwark, the protector of the people. And the destruction of Jerusalem was postponed because James was there interceding as a righteous man. Sort of like when Abraham was talking to God and those two angels when they were going to go destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham works him down from 50 righteous men to 10 righteous men. If there are 10 righteous men there, will you spare it? And God said, yeah, sure. Of course, he didn't find 10 righteous men. But the point was, is if there had been, God would have stayed the hand of judgment. Well, this is a tricky situation because do we want God to stay the hand of judgment this time? For us and our families who want to remain in favor of liberty and injustice and in faith and all that, yeah, we do. But do we really want to save the nation in the decadence and the evil that it's in? I don't. I don't. But I do pray for a place, political of some nature, where we can establish a place where our deliverance is assured, or at least has better than a 50-50 chance, and it is a place of refuge. And I think that's still possible, maybe on smaller portions, I don't know. And I know I'm not giving you solid answers here. I know I'm not. But I felt a little duty because of the request that was made of me that I at least come on and discuss these issues. So to sum it up, what we have here is a situation where God is, or I should say, we are being divided. Remember, some time ago I said we've got to embrace this division. We have to say it's happening. The wheat and the tares are being divided, for lack of a better term. We know this has to happen. We know it's going to happen. So we just have to embrace it and be willing to choose the right and do the right and stand up and say no to the tyranny. Again, you have every right to defend yourself against an attack of deadly force, and these procedures are definitely in that category. But you have to be as wise as a serpent and as harmless as a dove as much as you can. You know, there are some scriptures that say, you know, that that you have to tell your accusers, those who are attacking you, you have to give them 3 warnings. And after the 3rd one, then they are delivered into your hands. So that's what we're trying to do, I think, at this point. I think it's still too early to take action, except on an individual basis when they come to try to place something in you that you do not want, and that is, in fact, an assault on your humanity and on your very life and the lives of your loved ones. At that point, when they come there, I think God would justify you in using whatever is necessary to stop that, even if it ends badly for you. So I bounced around a little bit today, and we got interfered with. I don't know whether it was a bad connection or whether it was, somebody not liking a couple things I said. But regardless, I am out in the wilds and the reeds here, next to a marsh and a river, and I probably ought to go ahead and go so that we don't lose the transmission completely, which can happen. But we're surrounded by evil, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to be tested as individuals, not as a nation anymore. The nation is destroyed. All nations they're ticking time bombs. They're all destroying themselves. They're all too big. They're all too evil. They all have this idea of empire. They're all evil. They're coming down. God's interested in us, ladies and gentlemen, where we are. This is our time to stand up for truth, liberty, justice, and not bend the knee to Baal. And that's really all I can tell you at this point. Remember, James died and he was a very righteous man. Jesus died and he was a very righteous man. And there have been hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of others in the same place. Therefore, endure to the end. Remain steadfast to the truth, to justice, to the liberty of yourself and others. And if need be, protect yourselves all the way to and including deadly force. And hopefully there will be this place of refuge, this place of deliverance that will at some point in time, it's got to be close, I hope, will be given to us. But it's going to be tough. A lot of you are going to have to leave where you are now, where you think you're comfortable and where you've got everything all set up and all your supplies and all that, and it's not going to be the place. It may be. I'm not saying it isn't. You know, the Holy One can protect you anywhere. It's just, I'm not sure that's how it's going to work in the end, that you'll probably end up having to pick up stakes and move someplace else. And I don't know where that is right now. I have some opinions I've talked about before. And I won't go into that here today. I think this is something that everybody has to have the download from the Creator for themselves, not from me. We're in a lot of trouble. But this is where crowns are going to... Yeah. This is where crowns are going to be earned. Not just given freely without warrant, but earned. Okay? I hope you enjoyed the marsh and the reeds. I'm getting a little warm now. Kind of out of the shade a little bit, so I guess I better go. And like I said, I didn't even know what I was going to say when I came here because my thoughts are all they're all over the place, you know what I mean? But it seems to come down to what I've said. Be a bulwark. be be the righteous in a world of unrighteousness. Be the stalwart in a world of cowardice. Be the faithful in the world of the deceitful and the unfaithful. We'll talk again later. Out here for now.